Hi, I am Tina Walker, and today I'm going to show you how to make this resin canvas using a stencil with some graphite paste on it. I love that look of it with the shiny resin on the background with the rough chunky paste on top of it. So I am going to get right to how to do this. I'm going to use this canvas here. It's a canvas that I've had kind of laying around. It was one that I painted on and cracked it. I really don't like it, so I'm going to repurpose this one and do the same thing that I did on the other canvas. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to mix some amazing clear glass cast resin. So I'm going to go ahead and get these out of the box. So just follow the instructions that are on the bottles. It's basically equal parts of both A and B. And then to get this black resin, I'm going to go ahead and add black dye to the resin as well. So let's go ahead and get these poured out. I'm going to go ahead and fill the entire cup up here just to make sure I have enough resin for the whole canvas. This one's, or maybe as much as this bottle has in it. It's almost empty. Put that lid back on and let it come down. There, it's almost full on that one. Alright, in the meantime too, I would recommend using some gloves. Have a baby wipe handy, but just put some gloves on while you're mixing this and applying it to the canvas. It is extremely sticky. Alright, so let's get the rest of that in here. Again, we want equal parts of the A and the B, because if you do not use equal parts, the resin will not cure properly. Alright, so we might not have enough of, and I can open another box, but what I'll do is when I pour it in the big cup to mix it, I just won't put all of this one in there. All right, then this was the A. I'm going to go ahead and put the black dye right into that. And just a trick, if you use this black dye, if you don't put enough black dye in the resin, it will be gray. So just go ahead and mix this up so you can see. And this will be black enough. I don't think it's going to be gray. Just make sure you've got that really mixed in to the A portion. Alright, so now I'm going to mix this, and remember I had just a little bit more of that than I did of the other one, so I'm not going to put the whole thing in, so we'll mix that. So then with resin, you just want to make sure, now it's a little bit difficult with the black because you can't see the cloudiness, but usually with the clear resin, it's cloudy until it's mixed well. And it's extremely cold out today here, so what I like to do with this clear resin, you couldn't do it with the casting resin because it cures too quickly, but you have a work time of about oh, about 30 minutes with this. So what I always do, especially in the winter time, is put it under a hot light and let it heat up a little bit, and that gets rid of some of the bubbles and makes it more fluid. So you can see what it looks like right now. So I'm going to go ahead and put it under a light, and I will be right back. Okay, so our resin has been heated for about, oh, I'd say about 5 minutes, 7 minutes or so. So you can see it's a lot more fluid because it's been warmed up a little bit by my light. So now we're going to go ahead and just pour it right on this canvas. I'm not concerned with the texture that's on this canvas. And to be honest, I think it would add a little bit of interest to it. But since we're going to go ahead and stencil on the canvas anyway, after the resin cures, you won't notice it that much to begin with. So I just gently move the resin to the edge of the canvas. Just have to take your time as you're doing this. Whoa. Alright, so we got some on the side here. Go ahead and just wipe that off. The baby wipe. You can see the resin goes pretty far. You don't need a lot of resin for these projects. And actually right now, because I have it tipped, it's coming off the side, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back down on the paper. Get another stick. That one was kind of sticky. And with the resin, unless you actually push it over the side, it creates a bubble there and it doesn't generally go over. So I'm just trying to get it as close to the edge as I can. And then when my resin piece is done, after the stenciling and everything, I'll paint the edges. I like to always finish off my canvases like that. All right, let's just put the rest of this in the center here. Move it around. All right. Alright, so my resin is on my piece for about the next hour or so. Every once in a while, you can see these areas, they will level out as the resin settles. For the next hour or so though, I will watch the edges to make sure resin isn't coming over the side, and if it does, I'll just wipe it away. But I'm going to go ahead and set this overnight. I want it to cure for about 24 hours before I put the stencil piece on it. So I will be back once this cures. Alright, while my resin is curing, I thought I'd go ahead and work on the centerpiece here. So on this canvas, this is a resin piece actually that was made with casting resin that I painted and glued to the canvas. I thought it would be fun to use some of these clay pieces that I made. Just a second. I found this at Michael's and I thought it would be kind of a cool shape, so I actually just stamped it into some clay. So I'm going to go ahead and paint these pieces of clay that I had, and then figure out how and which ones I'm going to use for the center of my piece. So to prep these, I'm going to go ahead and just cover each one with some gesso. So let me get some gesso out here. Alright, so just going to prep them with a layer of gesso, and then once these are dry, we'll come back and paint them the base color, and then I'll show you a really simple way to create that kind of aged, stained look on each one of these pieces. Let's get these painted first. And the last one. I actually made these quite a while ago. I love, as I'm working on other projects or bits, I usually make extra stuff, so this, I had the clay out and I was working on something else, but I thought since I had extra clay, I might as well go ahead and make these. So I've had these sitting in my stash for a while, just waiting for the perfect project. So I'll go ahead and let that gesso dry, and then we'll be back. Alright, my pieces are dry, and I also, off camera, went ahead and coated some clay beads. I keep a few of these usually around with gesso as well, because I thought I'd go ahead and paint those up, because I might want to go ahead and use those on my canvas. So I'm going to just use some Paper Artsy paint to coat these clay pieces. Let's go ahead and get a paintbrush, and I'm just going to paint them. Nothing super fancy. I'm not really caring about the brush strokes. Just making sure I get the paint down in the cracks that were formed on this clay. And I'm just going to make sure the edges are covered in the back as well in case they stick up on the canvas. So just go ahead and I'm going to paint each one of these. This is a semi-opaque paint. Actually, an opaque paint would probably be better, but I couldn't find a color that I liked. So we're gonna go with this one. Might just have to put 2 coats of paint on it before the next step. And if I decide not to use all these on this canvas, then all I have to do If I want to use it for something else, it's just paint over it. You know, that's a good thing about paint. Let's paint these little beads. That one didn't have a hole in it. These ones do, so I can string those on my canvas. I really like how imperfect these little beads are. And this is perfect to do with that leftover clay that you have. Just make sure, unless you want to drill a hole in it after it dries, just poke a hole in it with an owl. Alright, I'm going to let these dry and probably put another coat on after they dry, and then I'll be back. Okay, I am back, and I have 2 coats of paint on each one of these. You can still see because the paint is transparent, so you can still see it, but that's okay for what we're going to do next. And here's my little beads. So the next thing that you want to do to create kind of that old aged look, so you can see here on this one, is I'm going to take some just black acrylic paint and some acrylic glazing liquid by Golden. Just and then let's mix up these two. And what this does with the acrylic paint is creates a glaze out of it, so it becomes transparent, more fluid. So we're going to use this as our antiquing layer. Let's make sure I get that all mixed in. So it's super simple. Let's go ahead and apply it to your piece. Just make sure you get into all of those cracks, because that's where the antiquing medium does its magic. And then just take a dry paper towel and wipe off accordingly. So you can wipe off as much as you want, as little as you want. You can see how that just sits inside of those recessed areas, and it creates an antique look. So you can see the difference between these two. It's a pretty drastic difference, but it's pretty cool, right? So let me go ahead and do these other pieces up here. And I could keep putting this glazing layer on, removing it, you know, building up layers. Actually, I think the other one I'm going to remove a little bit more of the inside here, so it's not so dark on the inside. So got those 2 pieces. You could do this if you wanted more of a brighter look. You could do it with white as well, or any color. I'm having a hard time holding on to these today. Okay. You can buy antique medium, but it's usually a little more pricier. So you can see I had put one on and I took it off, and I think I took a little too much off, so I just went over it again till I got it to the look that I was going for. It just totally transforms the piece. I like to, like if I'm doing a monochromatic project, I love doing this technique because you can paint everything the same color or various shades of a color, but once you apply the glaze, this antiquing type of look to it, it immediately creates a cohesive look across all of the shades, just because you've got that tone on top. So let's do our little beads. We can't forget our little beads. I'll just paint these all first. And I made way too much glazing medium than I'm needed. I'm bad about that. I don't know about you. I always tend to mix up more paint than I ultimately. A lot of times I'll take it if it's a particularly pretty color and just swipe it around in my art journal just so I'm not wasting the paint. And all I'm doing for the beads is just kind of squeezing it in the paper towel just so I'm not removing all of it. Let's just go back to these and make sure I'm good here with the look. Okay. All right, so that is done. So we'll set those aside and let those dry. So let's go ahead and check on our canvas from yesterday. Just a second, let me wipe my hands off so I don't have so much paint when I'm working on the canvas here. I actually started wearing gloves a lot more. Just number one, I got tired of washing my hands, especially in the winter. They get so dry to begin with. But then at work I started reading a lot of the chemical restrictions and actually got a little paranoid with the chemicals that are in some paint, so I thought, why not go ahead and wear gloves. I mean, there's still times I want to get my hands into it. So here is our canvas. The resin has dried overnight. You can't really tell on camera, but because it was so cold here, I do have thousands of micro bubbles here. I could have zapped it last night with my torch, but I didn't. But since it's black, you can't really see the little micro bubbles. I can, but we're going to cover it up anyway with the stencil. So to have a different look than the sample that we have, I thought this would be kind of a cool, funky pattern that goes kind of interestingly with this because it's really raw and organic. So I guess it doesn't really matter because I can move my canvas around. So I'm just going to go ahead and center that on the canvas. And this is the texture paste that I'm going to use. It's super gritty, super messy, just warning you in advance. But I love how it looks. So, okay, I've got it on here where I want. So I'm going to go ahead and just scrape. You can hear it. You can tell how gritty it is. And just scrape it on to the canvas. And the other thing is, too, because this is, it's not like a lot of modeling paste that you can put a pretty thin layer on it because this is so gritty. You tend to use quite a bit of product, actually. But that's okay. That's what the product's there for, to be used, right? I always get super panicky because I want to hoard everything that I have instead of actually using it for what it's intended to be used for. So, making sure I get all of these corners. So my favorite part of any canvas reveal is when you have your piece like this and then you pull the canvas off. Let's clean this off because it's so gritty. That's when I just go, ah! So let me get this in the camera so you can actually see. So we'll go ahead and pull that off. Isn't that just gorgeous? So let me go ahead and just clean up these edges here. I don't like how they are overhanging. Just the excess off the edge. And we will set this aside to dry before we finish it. And make sure with the stencil, because you definitely don't want this to dry on the stencil, so when I turn the camera off, I'll go rinse that really quick. But just here you can see what that looks like before it dries on that canvas. And I love that complete opposite of the shiny resin underneath with this chunky, crusty paste on top of it. So I'm going to set that aside to dry, and I will let these pieces dry, and I will be back. Okay, so I am back. Just to show you, I went ahead and painted the sides of my canvas and then aged it just like I did these pieces here, so you can see how those turned out. And then I just sanded a little bit here. You can see, again, it just brings up some of that white underneath just for a different look. The other thing that I did off camera, I actually drilled, so you can see a hole here, here, and here, because I decided I'm going to use wire to hold this metal piece down on the center because it's a little too heavy. I don't think glue or E6, was it E6000? Yeah, E6000 will hold it down, so I'm going to adhere it with just some wire. But the first thing I want to do, I did this off camera, it's just a piece of rust-dyed fabric that I put some cheesecloth on top of it, and there's a layer of, you can see these little shiny things, lace in between the two, and then I just hand stitch with embroidery floss all of these little crosses. So you can see the backs, well, that's kind of pretty with the rest, but so what I'm going to do is adhere this down to the canvas. These will go on like this, and then I'm going to attach that with a wire. And then I think for my beads, I'm going to go ahead and attach them. There's holes on the corners as well. I'm going to go ahead and attach those to the corners of the piece. So the first thing I'm going to do is glue this down, and I'm going to use some soft matte gel for that. And this stuff is pretty good for things like this. You could use fabric glue too if you wanted to. Just going to go ahead and put some down here. I'm only going to put it in the center here. That's going to be covered up with the rust piece because I don't want the whole thing to be super stiff on the outside. I want some of that softness to it. So that right there should adhere this down. So just make sure I get it centered as much as I can. So, you know, the glue's right here in the center. This piece will cover that. So this out here will be loose. So let's see, do I have it centered? Yeah, I think so. So I'm going to set that aside to dry before I start adhering the rusty metal piece to the middle. I just want to make sure that's on there pretty good before I start messing around with it too much. So I'll be right back. Alright, so I am back. I went ahead and attached the metal piece with some wire, so it's just wired through the back of the canvas here. And then I also wired each one of the little beads to the corners. I thought that was just kind of a fun little piece, and they do move a little bit, so it creates a little bit of movement. So with that, I think this canvas is done. So you can see the sides, and I really like the color palette for that one. So here's the first one we started with, and here is the second one. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial and have a wonderful day. Thanks.